Lee. Old Clearwater's got a mighty tall sail, oh, make her go high. We raise it up there without fail, oh, make it go high. Say, hey, Clearwater, oh, make it go high. Hey, Clearwater, oh, make it go high. A little piece of pumpkin, a little piece of pie. Oh, make me go high. See clear water before I die. Oh, make it go high. Say, hey, clear water. Oh, make it go high. Say, hey, clear water. Oh, make it go high. Clear waters on the river. Clear waters on the river. It's a long haul, you better believe.
Sarah is a walking encyclopedia of millions of songs. We had arranged for her to do the opening song. I just asked her a couple minutes ago to do this one and one more after lunch. So thanks so much, Sarah. This is Abe. He's moderating this panel. Abe was one of the first people that I spoke to when I was conceptualizing what we could do about this conference on leadership. And two things that he said really stood out, and I still remember them, and they seem really apt. He said, what leaders need the most right now is courage and hope. Abe is a majority leader of the Ulster County Legislature. He was just reelected. I voted for him 3 times. And, he was the only one running, so I didn't run. But I'm done. Go ahead. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Morning. I was fortunate and very, very excited to become a leader at a very young age. At 26, I somehow found myself leading a 30-person marketing agency that I had worked at for a couple of years. We had just gone through a major leadership shakeup, and one of the founders had left, and I really quickly had to figure out what leadership meant while also trying to stabilize a very nervous team after the leadership shakeup. And in those early days, I often asked myself, what does this situation need from me? I had an idea of what a leader must look like, and I turned myself inside out to become that person. Here's what I thought leadership was. Be the most mature person in the room. Never show any uncertainty. Be indispensable, and make everyone else feel secure while you figure it out behind the scenes. And for a while, it seemed to work. We made changes that seemed small but turned out to be transformative. We fundamentally changed the employee culture, and we removed the time clock. Small things can make a huge difference. The previous culture of punching in on the clock had employees eating lunch at their desks, afraid to lose a billable hour. Suddenly, something remarkable happened. We soon had 80 to 90% of the company eating together at our massive conference room table every day for lunch. We literally were running out of chairs. We were trying to stabilize the company and our own nervous systems after a culture of fear and uncertainty. We began to treat our employees like the adults that they were. Now, this was during a time when the tech industry was offering all sorts of flashy perks, ping pong tables, free snacks, elaborate office spaces, and we tried some of that too. But none of it worked until we actually paid our people what they were worth and treated them with basic respect. The perks weren't a substitute for taking care of people's basic needs. And we tried to make sure that any perks that we offered with limited resources really zeroed in on those basic needs. Within that thinking, we implemented a CSA program. For just a few $100s for each employee, we were able to put food on everyone's table. When you have limited resources, there's really no substitute for putting food on people's tables. I was learning that small changes in how you treat people can create massive cultural shifts. But underneath this success, I was operating under crushing pressure. I believed the company couldn't survive without me. I thought showing any vulnerability would undermine the stability that everybody needed. I was confusing leadership with being a superhuman. And then, a few months before my 31st birthday, I had a very severe stroke while I was on the phone with our principal investor. After receiving life-saving care at Kingston Hospital, I was airlifted to a level 1 trauma center downstate. And as I'm lying in that helicopter, you know what I'm thinking about? When can I get back to the office? I was genuinely thinking, believe it or not, in the helicopter, that I might be back in the office the next morning. I was in the hospital until Friday, and I was back at my desk at 8 a.m. on Monday. But here's the really telling part. I was planning on keeping the stroke a secret from all of my colleagues, from my partners, and from the society at large. I was running for county legislature for the first time, and I was terrified that people would see me as diminished and as not viable and as weak. When my moment of testing came, I didn't trust the foundation that I had built that I needed to support me through that moment. Instead, I doubled down on my performance, trying to prove that I was still the invulnerable leader that I thought that they needed. That period after my stroke was one of the most challenging of my life, and I made it harder by trying to hide and by trying to perform invulnerability when what I actually needed was to give myself care. Ultimately, I decided to embrace a different choice. I decided to be honest about the stroke. I realized that I didn't need less honesty, I needed more. My stroke was now part of my story, whether I liked it or not, and I needed to lead with authenticity. I realized that my employees needed the most honest version of myself that I could bring, and I realized that I deserved that person to flourish as well. By the time of my first election that year, I had decided to make a career shift. I had done my job for that team, and it was time for something new, something that was more deeply connected with who I am. I decided to take this new approach to my work in the legislature, and something unexpected happened. The vulnerability that I thought would disqualify me actually became one of my greatest strengths. People didn't see me as diminished, they saw me as human. They respected the openness more than they ever respected the performance. That experience fundamentally changed how I understood leadership. It freed me to lead as myself instead of as the character that I thought I needed to play. A few years later, I was serving as majority leader of the Ulster County Legislature, leading the Democratic caucus, while our constituents faced an unprecedented challenge of the pandemic, housing, addiction, mental health, and the list goes on. I also co-founded my current company, UniCollab, which is working to change the way land use approvals happen throughout the country, making smart growth possible for municipalities of all sizes. Coming into these roles, I learned to apply the lesson that I had taken too long to learn in my prior iteration: to be vulnerable, to discover that I could lead in ways I never had allowed myself before. Now I think about leadership a little bit differently. Sometimes my caucus, the Democratic caucus, needs me to be a fighter, to bring emotion and fire into contentious issues. Sometimes they even need me to be a lightning rod, to say the difficult thing that everyone's thinking, so they don't have to put themselves at risk. In these moments, some of the traits that I had tried so long to diminish have actually become my strengths. My ability to react emotionally, it was no longer a liability. Instead, it was a strength because my internal compass was calibrated on what mattered. When we were creating the county's first housing action fund, which is a $15 million initiative to fund affordable housing, we tackled topics that made people uncomfortable. We had to talk about things that no one wanted to address. I was able to harness that fire, that emotion that I naturally possess, and bring that into these conversations. Making people uncomfortable was actually important because my constituents were suffering. Authentic leadership, showing up as who you really are, turned out to be more powerful than performing what I thought leadership was meant to be. The vulnerability I found while navigating a health crisis taught me that people trust leaders when they're real. At 26, I was asking myself the question, what does the situation mean for me? But I'm not afraid of the answer anymore. Sometimes it needs calm analysis, sometimes it needs passionate advocacy, sometimes it needs fire, but it always needs authenticity. So one of the topics that we're really confronting today, and the topic of this panel, is what gets in the way of leaders. Often, it's our own ideas about what leaders are meant to be. We think we need to be invulnerable. We think we need to be indispensable. We think that showing our humanity is a weakness. We think mature leadership is being restrained and buttoned up, especially when we're younger and leading people that are older than us. But here's what I learned, and here's what I want you to take away. Your sustainability matters to everyone that you serve. Leadership that burns out ultimately fails everyone. The question isn't just what do they need from me, but it's what do we need from me to make this situation sustainable and effective for everyone, including me. You must also ask yourself, how am I uniquely suited to meet this moment? Leadership is going to look different for everyone. Being an authentic leader means finding your innate talents and bringing that to the team. Your unique traits are your superpower, not your weakness. Build authentic relationships by being genuine. Because when your moment of testing comes, and it will come, you'll need a team that knows the real you. And finally, and this is especially for the younger leaders in this room, you don't need to prove you belong by sacrificing yourself in the process. Be comfortable with being your own kind of leader, defined by who you actually are, not by an image of what you think people believe that you need to be. Ultimately, authority comes from solving people's problems and serving effectively, not from performing someone else's idea of what a leader should look like. Life will test your leadership in ways that you can never predict. And when that happens, the only path forward is authenticity. Don't wait for your own crisis to learn this lesson. Ask yourself now, what are you performing that you could just be? Where are you trying to be invulnerable when you could be building real trust? And if you could unlock, and what could you unlock if you lead as yourself instead of as the leader you think you're supposed to be? Thank you. I'm joined by some wonderful panelists. I'm going to introduce the first one now here. Andrew O'Grady is the CEO of Mental Health America of Dutchess County. Andrew has led MHA of Dutchess County for over 20 years, guiding the organization through major transitions in behavioral health and substance abuse disorders. Beyond his organizational work, he's a regular radio contributor focusing on mental health stigma and public education. And previously, he served as president of the New York State Care Management Coalition, where he worked to strengthen New York's health home care system. Andrew, go ahead.
You can take it off and hold it. Yeah.
How's that? There you go. Okay, good. I need the microphone because I had my own adversity this year. It was New Year's Eve. I was not drinking alcohol. I went to work at 6:30 in the morning and I felt like I had a little cough. But by the time 1 o'clock rolled around, I was feeling pretty crappy. So I went home. We were going to have people over our house, and my wife checked to see if they still wanted to come because I was sick. But I was going to stay in my room and locked away so nobody would be near me. And about 7 o'clock with a house full of people, I got up to go into the bathroom and I passed out. I didn't eat or drink anything all day, and I had the flu. I didn't know it. The hospital alerted me. After I passed out a second time in the bathroom, but I made enough noise for people to hear me. I was laying in a pool of blood because my head got smashed into a radiator. And anyway, ambulance came, and that was horrible. Never got to put that on a checkbox. Rode in an ambulance, when you look at those things. What did you do in your life? I did that. Just like you. Anyway, long story short, I had that surgery and they paralyzed my vocal cord in the process. So that is the gravelly voice you hear today, which is unfortunate. But that's okay. We all have our adversity and we overcome it. I love the theme that I'm hearing tonight about, leaders and being yourself and acknowledging the areas that you may not be great at. And understanding who you are as a leader. I was lucky growing up. I think if I went, there were two schools in my town. One was a small little school with 40 people in my graduating class, and the other was Catskill High School. Catskill High School was bigger. If I went to Catskill High School, I probably wouldn't have done the things that I did that helped me be a leader, that I did and experienced in the small Catholic school. I was on a school newspaper. I was on student government. I played all the sports. All those things help you gain confidence and learn how to lead. Then I went to a smaller college. I didn't go to a big Marist. I went to Mount St. Mary College in Newburgh. And because I went there, and if I went to SUNY Albany or some other big school, I know I would not have done the things I got to do at the Mount, which allowed me. So you students from Bard, even New Paltz a little bigger, but it gives you opportunities to try things that I would have been scared to do. You have to understand yourself and know what you're willing to try. And as young people, we're intimidated, still intimidated to this day in many situations. But because I was in that smaller school, I was able to play sports on a college level. I was able to be part of student government. I was able to be part of the school newspaper again, which was great. And in the role in sports, I was able to become the captain. And that helped me learn that to be a leader, you have to notice everybody's skill set. I heard words that I wrote down before about what are people's superpowers, as they just said. You have to know the people you're working with, the people you're trying to motivate, the people that are going to lift you up as a leader. Not to get them to follow you, but to build them up, find their superpower. We go in the agency that I manage and run. I encourage people to go to conferences, and conferences like this one so important. I've learned so much today so far. I love what I'm hearing from everybody, and the speakers are magnificent. When we go to conferences, I try to get as many people to go as possible. And then I always make sure I take everybody out to dinner at a big table. Granted, some people on this side of the table might not be able to talk to people on this side, but we learn about each other. I love the exercise that you had talked about meeting somebody and that you don't know and learning about them. I've learned that I have an employee that is the nephew of Jerry Nadler, the politician in Washington. I didn't know that. I've learned that I have superpowers. People that did things. One was a lawyer. I mean, you learn amazing things about the staff. I had a gentleman, an older gentleman, who was a case manager, and he had leg problems, and this was 2 years ago. I valued him very much, but I could see that the job was killing him because he had to walk down our stairs, go out to the car, get in the car, drive to a client's house, go to another client's house, come back, schlep around all over the place. It's a hard job being a care manager in the mental health field. And I would watch him on my video cameras in my office, and he would be like, limping to the car. And then we went out to this conference, and I sat down with him, and I got to know who he was, and I heard he had a history working in long-term plan giving for hospice and for Salvation Army down in New York City, and he had a law degree. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've always wanted to do that and have that as part of the agency, because we do great work in our community, and I wanted to make sure that we're successful going forward. So this planned giving option about engaging people and seeing if they would give to the agency in their wills is something that's very awkward to try to get off the ground. And do you want to invest the time and money into it? But here I have a staff member that would probably have much better quality of life if he just sat at the desk and made phone calls and then out to meet people when he needed to, but not that. So he was so grateful for that, and he put himself. We put him in that position, and he's doing really well there. But yeah, so I'm gonna ramble a lot. I ramble a lot. I'm hearing a lot of great things from the people here, and I think that the lessons that I've taken away from my leadership path. My leadership path started after I became a master's level social worker. I worked with Brad actually in Beacon, and we worked in a clinic together. And it was in that role, that was one of my first professional roles. But even when I worked at Ponderosa Steakhouse, or when I worked as a lifeguard, or whatever I did prior to my professional life, I always found myself seeing things, seeing a bigger picture. So you're not just focused on what your role is. If you're the type of individual, as you young leaders hopefully will be, you're going to see things outside your specific function and your specific role. From noticing that, clients sitting in a waiting room need some type of distraction or some type of education, so we added a television in there, we added materials for them to read. Little things like that. Own own the own where you work as if it's your business, without impinging upon the owner, or but work as if you own it. Work as if you want to make it better. Work as if it's yours. Embrace everything. I was never afraid to, unclog the toilets, or whatever had to happen. Even today, I mow the lawn at NHA. Sometimes I get in and the leaves are all over the place. I'll take the leaf blower and blow them all over the place. Door open. If you're a leader, door should be open, not shut. You shouldn't be behind closed doors. Be yourself. Show your vulnerabilities. People need to know that you're real. You know, be the little kid. I mean, I'm a child half the time. I joke around, and but there's a time to be real, and there's a time to just be yourself. And the other thing I would say that I took, Abe, from what you said, is that I notice in meetings, I tend to be the guy on statewide meetings, even on national meetings, that I sit and I listen to everybody talk. And a lot of times in my field, they use keywords. They say those things, person-centered, and they say all those things that we're supposed to say. And we're trying to roll out a project or a new way of doing something. And I'm the guy that seems to be the one that points out that's all well and good, and that's great, but what happens when this happens, and what are the barriers, and what are the fences you're gonna have to jump over? Why isn't this gonna work? And those are the things that are important. And the reason I know those things is because I stay focused, even though we have 250 staff and we have 25 programs now. I remain a person who understands each one of those programs and understands what the people doing in those programs, no matter what level, are going through or dealing with. Because if you can stay connected like that, then when you're meeting on a level statewide or nationally trying to affect change, you can actually bring to the table reality. Too many times in this country, our elected officials on the national, state level, even within the departments that oversee things, Department of Health, Department of Mental Health, Department of Alcohol and Substance Abuse, on the federal level, they make decisions and they have no clue what's going on in real life. They have no clue that making this decision is not going to have an impact down here like you're trying to have, because they've never done it. They need to ask and look for input from people who are doing the work. And it doesn't always happen. So I know I'm sorry. I'll stop for now, and I'll just say that you need to look for people's superpowers, hear what people have to say, no matter what level they're in, and take it and learn from it. And everybody brings something positive to the table. Always look for people's strengths. Understand that they have weaknesses. You know how easy it is for people to, I see it all the time. People love to talk about other people. Oh, well, they're this, and this. They talk too much, they're whatever. Okay, well, they're also this, and this. Here's some positives. I'd rather focus on that. We can all find somebody's negative. Let's focus on the positive and let's pull that from that. And don't worry so much about the negative. Find the positive in people. Whatever you want.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Our next panelist is David Toman, the Executive Director of Hudson River Sloop Clearwater, where he leads an environmental education advocacy organization dedicated to protecting the Hudson River and engaging communities. He brings more than 25 years of nonprofit leadership experience, including Vice President of Operations and CFO at Mohawk Preserve, right down the hill here. And David began his career in environmental advocacy at Delaware Nature Society, where he spent 12 years in finance and operations. David, go ahead.
Thank you so much. I'm looking at my watch because it's still morning, so good morning, everybody. So good to hear what we've heard so far today and have everybody here joining on really an important topic, I think, in the time of age, which we've been discussing and we know is critically important. Some of the things I will say are very focused to where my career has been, which is in the nonprofit and the service space. Similar to Andrew and the work that he's done that's been so good. And in that space, one of the things that brings power and enjoyment to the work that we do is that it is so mission driven and it's so community based. But I think you can take leadership, much as Abe has said in his career, what he was able to establish, you can take those concepts into all different forms of organization, whether it be business for profit, whether it be nonprofit, or whether it be governmental or other types of service. So we have to think broad spectrum of how leadership affects where we're going. I want quick, if I can, because I was sitting at the table and we had wonderful answers, but I wanted to compliment on those answers to the question of hope. I have a 26 and a 23-year-old, so I know where their generation is and these concerns of hope, and I'm seeing some heads nodding. So I think this is we're at a period of time where our history is putting fear ahead of hope, and with good reason. There's a lot of things out there to be worried about in our time of age that we're at right now, but we're talking about leadership. And one of the things that, although for anyone who evolves into leadership or is there and already knows it, is there should be expectations on leadership, and we should have expectations on leadership. Our leadership needs to lead, and they need to do their job, and they need to do their job well. And where I think hope is not getting the attention it needs is the failure in high-level leadership right now, particularly politically, that is not addressing the problem. So in hope, and I want to just manage to that, you can't, I don't want to use a double negative. You must acknowledge the problems and the struggles that are ahead of us. They have to be on the table. We have to know what they are, because then the leadership has to provide the work that's necessary to find the pathway through and past. That's where hope lies. Hope lies in knowing there's an opportunity. We might not know what the answer is yet, but we need to know that we're on a pathway to finding that answer. So I hope for our younger generation, and my kids in particular, when I talk with them and I see this fear of today's world, that we need leaders that we hold expectations to, that address the problem, acknowledge the problem, and say, we're working together to solve that, and we're going to find our pathway past it. Going back to my kids, I'll be the dad thing here. If you were to ask them, what's the one thing their dad always said to them as they're growing up that was really annoying? So this is my little mantra with my kids, but I think it carries forward. And that's create your opportunities. You don't have to take them, but you got to create them. So when you're making decisions in your life and in your business and in your leadership and what you're doing, one of your things, if you keep looking for how can I create the opportunity, then you can try to find the pathway to it. Like I said, you don't necessarily have to take it, but if you've created the opportunities, it's just that you're giving yourself a chance. Follow that up with keep it real. And this gets back to what many have said, you've got to acknowledge what it is we need to navigate past. And you got to keep it real, because if you don't, you're not going to truly solve it. And then the last one is make it happen. After you figure out that pathway, work with who you have and make it happen. And so much of leadership is that concept, right? Leadership is leading. Therefore, it must mean you are leading someone. So it's the group of people of whom you're leading. It's not providing the talent for those people. They're providing the talent. They're providing a lot of the creativity. They're providing a lot of what is the answer? What is the problem? How do we tackle it? Your role as leader is pulling that together to help navigate and focus in on what is that pathway and take that forward. So I think that that's really important. I want to go back to Eric Ellison's talk with his experience. So another thing we should all leave here with is share your circular sauce. So everybody go home and share your circular sauce, whatever it is, because you don't know who that mentor can be.
and who that answer is that can help you be better at what you do and try to take that forward. So share your circular selves for sure. Another thing that we did earlier today that I think is also an important part of leadership, and Clearwater does it very well. So I'll just little fun part of Clearwater, of which Sarah was on our board for quite a long time and has been a part of Clearwater for decades. We actually open, similar to this meeting, we open all of our board meetings with a song, of which Sarah has been many of those songs. And it puts us in the right mind frame to know what that meeting is going to take us forward on. And that's really important. And our moment of silence did the same. In our educational programming out on the Hudson River, absolutely every time there is a moment of silence, and that moment of silence is to give everybody the chance to look out, appreciate. With the Clearwater, hopefully you're under sail, it's quiet, and you're absorbing the experience, the atmosphere, what it is you are to care about. Then everything educationally, whatever else we're doing in that process ties in and makes sense. In leadership, we can do that same thing, right? We can make sure we're grounded in what it is we're trying to do. Our particular question was, what gets in the way of leadership? And which is a really good question, because there's lots of things that get in the way of leadership all the time. I could go on a couple that I had this year, but I'm going to hold off of that right now. But I think as leaders, we need to approach that question differently. There will always be things that get in the way. Our job of leaders is to acknowledge whatever that obstacle is and then help guide in the pathway of how to move past it. And that's our role, to try to move past those chats. So to me, when we as a leader hear what gets in the way of leadership, we have to and we change that wording to what is our challenge that we need to find a solution to. And when we're leaders, we got to own that question, and we got to find a way past that. So I wanted to share that idea. I also wanted to hit on, so let me hit in the service realm of which we are in. What are some of those obstacles that we've had that I can share in particular? And one is, we need to know what the vision is, what the mission is. We need to keep it focused sufficiently that it can be achievable. And then we have to work with those that are on the team to navigate that pathway. So you'll hear me say navigate a lot. We sail a big boat on Hudson, so we get to use those terms. And that is a big part of the challenge, because there's so many possibilities, and that you can go in many different directions. But really trying to hone in on what is the vision, the mission, how does it get delivered? And then the bigger question, if it was delivered correctly or well, what's the response? Did those who we intended to serve, were they actually served? And is that the feedback that comes back to us? So we can't just assume we know what is needed. We have an idea, we're going to deliver it, but we need to listen and see if what was delivered actually met the need that's out there. And we need to be willing to adjust if it hasn't. So feedback is also quite important on, did we do it? Did we hit what our goal was? And again, remember, my history has all been in the nonprofit space. For those who are younger in the room, navigating your pathways, trying to figure out where you're headed to. I'm one of those guys. So I had a story almost like Eric's this morning, which triggered me to think of this, to speak to it. In my 20s, I went to college, didn't quite land where I wanted to head to, went back to college after I realized that business management of some sort seemed to be my natural inclination. I wanted to head that direction, and I'm like, I need a tool of business. I went back to school for accounting, zero intent to ever be a CPA, but I needed a tool of business to take me forward and make me better at trying to be able to be a leader. So I just wanted to share that experience, because without knowing where that pathway was, it took me many different directions, but I landed here, somewhere where in my entire childhood to where I am now, I have always been an outdoor enthusiast. My happiest space is on a canoe or a pair of cross-country skis in the newly fallen snow and just being outdoors. And somehow those two pathways merged. They merged when I went to work for the Delaware Nature Society because my mother found this tiny little ad and I answered it and sent an application in, and all of a sudden things changed because she knew that she knew her child, and she's like, "That's your deep-rooted passion. Find a pathway to it." And that happens. So create your opportunities, keep it real, make it happen. Realize that you may not know your full pathway now, but follow it. And leadership can evolve in that process when you have the qualities to be a strong leader. I think that's what I'm going to talk.
Thank you so much. So I want to ask a question that I think is probably on the minds of a lot of, particularly the young people in the room. And built into the question, I'm also going to knock out the most obvious answer for you guys, just to warn you. So I think often people want to lead, and they're asking themselves, how do I lead? How do I get noticed as a leader? And when you're kind of entering a new space, you're going to be, kind of the new person, or maybe lower on the totem pole. But the most obvious answer, of course, is find the core goal of the organization, the mission, and figure out how to deliver that mission. Really try and double down on that. Find new ways of fulfilling that mission. But I want to go a step further and say, how do you do that when you're navigating organizations that have old ways of doing things? There are old ways of doing things. They can be stagnant. There might be people. I think one thing that young people and that I see is there are a lot of leaders that struggle to get out of the way. And so when you're a younger person that's coming in, navigating that environment, you have ideas. How do you navigate that? How do you get noticed as a leader and implement change in an organization like that? Whoever wants to go first, just jump on it.
You want to take that? Okay. So one thing I didn't hit on, because I think it's another important word, leadership. Well, first off, you're only going to get there if you work hard. That's all there's. And I think this idea of being, I don't know, lack of a better word, but antsy, like wanting to get it done, having this drive to be, to really go get it and try to make it happen. So working hard is necessary. But there's a word I haven't heard yet today, so I want to throw it out there, and that's persuasion. I think to be a good leader, if you have a great idea, you're going to need to persuade others, because again, it's leadership. So it's that you to other people. You're going to need to be able to persuade others that it is a good idea. It should be implemented, reel them into how it can most benefit. And if you are successful at that, you have just taken a step in leadership. So I'm going to share that idea.
In your example, I think for the younger people, it is a long game sometimes, and it shouldn't be a game. But I think I would add to your comment, volunteer to do other things. So committees, other things that you can get involved in. Don't just stay in the lane of your job. I'm thinking about somebody that comes into my agency as a care manager. They have to hard job. They have to do what they have to do. But if you really want to be a leader and you want to be noticed, it's not about, it's about doing your job well, but it's also about volunteering and going above and beyond, doing something that's not in your job duty. Be part of a committee within the county. Our agency is part, we have people sitting on 30 committees. Ask to be part of that. Be part of something bigger than your role. That's going to do it. And don't just stay in your lane. And you have to balance. I don't want to use the word annoying. That's negative. But you have to balance. Getting in somebody's face and trying to say me, look at me, with persuasion in a positive way, volunteering, and that's why I go back to my first comment. It's a long game. It's not like you can say, hey, people tend to think they want an immediate gratification. And when I heard you say, how do you deal with an agency that's kind of stuck in the old ways? My initial thought was run and go to another agency that's not. But that's not a leader. And if you want to be a leader, then stick with it and see the positive aspects of the agency. I stayed at MHA because I saw the I saw the whole picture and I saw that we had the ability to do much greater things. And when I took over, there was 100 people working there. Now there's 250. We had like 7 programs. Now we have 20 something, and we're not spread too thin. And I know that if you hold, the other thing that every leader should do is hold the, let's say the bar is here, the bar of the funders or the people, whoever's setting the bar is here. You want to set the bar here for everybody you're working with and get them to embrace that, because everybody's going to fall short. And if you fall short at times, you're still over the bar that people expect you to do. So that's really important.
Great, and I think we're gonna now take some questions from the audience.
That is true.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go
So we've
first.
got one over here.
Hello, hi, my name's Amy. I've been in leadership positions, and I can't help but call you out on something. This is about barriers to leadership, and one of the greatest problems we have is that we make assumptions about people. For example, one of my greatest mentors was chief of staff at the EPA. Another one was deputy chief at the USDA. These are people in the power structure. And if we assume that they don't know what's going on, these people ran these organizations for 40 years under different administrations, right and left. They were in the field all the time. They knew, just like these points you're making. As a leader, you have to know what people are doing if you want them to do it. This does happen, and if we're going to be leadership to make systemic change, we have to work within the power structures, right? You can't just say they don't know. That's a swamp. That's what people who want to get rid of good leadership. And so I would just, maybe you want to all comment on the problems of making assumptions of people who are in power, that they got there and they're disassociated with the rest of us.
Sure, thank you for that. I would say, to build on that, realizing, I mean, I think maybe go back to some of my comments about realizing the kind of humanity of everybody that's involved here. I think there is, sometimes it feels like there's a culture, and I say this as someone who has been on both sides of this, and it's amazing how quickly you end up on the other side of it when you're in a position of leadership and you have folks that are like, you don't know what you're doing, or you don't know this. I think you need to kind of suspend assumptions on both sides. You need to not assume that everyone in a position of leadership is out of touch. And as a leader, you also need to not assume that everyone who's calling you out of touch is wrong. Because you actually pretty quickly fall out of touch, honestly. And I think that it's really important. I think one of us might have mentioned, being kind of in the field, doing the work, and continuously doing that, because things really change, and they change pretty dynamically. And I think that I have definitely seen situations from the perspective of leadership where other leaders really are not in the field, and I think that they might have come through that, but that's behind them, and it's really important to keep connecting in with that, keep connecting in with service delivery, and the kind of core constituency that you're serving, and being at, you should be willing to do every single role that you can do, and at the same time, for a kind of someone coming from the outside or coming up in the organization who might view the leaders as out of touch, remember that those folks came through that process, and it's not very persuasive when you, going back to the point about persuasion, it's not very persuasive when you immediately just say you're out of touch. I think that you kind of have to go on that journey with a leader and say, okay, show me how. Like if I was having a conversation to navigate what you're describing, if I was having a conversation, I'd say, okay, talk to me how your journey through the service delivery as you're getting to the position you're in now has informed your work now. And it's very flattering to do that, and flattering is a good persuasion tactic, but also it kind of helps people reconnect with that. And I think that we can all really use that. So I don't really view it as a black or white issue. It's really something that we all need to have more empathy around, I think, on both sides of that dynamic.
Hey, hi, want to say something, David?
I was just going to compliment what you said. I was recently, and the topic doesn't matter because we're talking about the leadership, the concept of leadership. I was recently in a meeting where there were New York State DEC members, there was federal environmental protection agency members and advocacy organizations around the table, and definitely two different points of view, but very good respected leadership in all perspectives of what was in that room. And all intent was one that you admired of whom you were talking with, whether they were on your agreement side or not. So I don't know if that helps complement what you're saying, because those people at those levels of leadership and problem solving are people highly and worthy of respect for the work that they're doing.
I would say point well taken. Thank you for the comment.
One last question before the roundtables from over there.
Yeah, hi, my question, so as a young leader, as Gen Z, how do you go above and beyond, because you guys were talking about that, without feeling burnout and not giving up when there's like still stuck in the old ways of the agencies? And I know like I'm not going to corporate America because I'm going to like becoming a teacher, but for those who are.
I think congratulations on being a teacher. That is your game going in that direction. That's great. My daughter's a teacher, and she's trying to hold on to her beliefs, and she's bringing new life into the school. You need to you just need to be you. Keep holding on to your experiences and try, challenge things. You don't have to outwardly challenge things, but if you're starting to get the message, do it this way because this is the way we've always done it, or ask the why. Somebody wants you to do it a certain way. There's nothing wrong with asking the why. We talked about that before. Why? You're curious. Why? If the answer is that that's the way we've always done it, then try to stretch outside the lines of norm and try to bring in something new, because we always need something new. We are constantly changing, as you just said. We're constantly evolving, and you have to stay with it the best you can. None of us can completely stay with it. I mean, I'm getting older. I mean, it happens. I always said if I start to become that leader, that's just looking at retirement down the road and not taking on new challenges and not trying new things and not applying for more contracts, then I'm ineffective and I shouldn't be in the role.
One thing I want to say, if I may, just one last thing, and this goes back to the theme of like kind of identifying your superpower. One thing I have noticed about Gen Z is that you're asking this question about burnout it's a very informed way of thinking about it, and it's something that people often, I think, prior generations wait a long time till it's too late to ask that question, and I think that comes from a space of having a lot of really heavy context that you've had to go through the pandemic as you're coming up in school, and just seeing what's going on in the world. In many ways, one of the superpowers I'm seeing from Gen Z is the fact that you're asking that question and bringing that to the conversation and saying, actually, not only how can I not get burned out, but how can I help this organization think about burnout, where some of the leaders from prior generations are facing burnout. That's a superpower that I think is coming into a lot of organizations as Gen Z enters the workforce, and I think that can really help us move forward, because it's a very real thing.
And if I could on that, I think the quality to try to maintain the best you can in that process is stay inspired, because your inspiration will show. And then the other thing, as you grow into whatever field you take forward, you'll be in teaching. One thing that is certain is hours input does not necessarily equal your output. So sometimes it's about focus. It's about what can you do best. So it is about the output quality. It is not about the hours quantity. And so think about that. And then the other thing I would just throw out there for you to have in thought as you're moving along in career is leaderships will change over. I will be replaced. And so what is the quality that guides you to be that next leader, and think in terms of that and build on that as you move through career. So thank you.
Okay, guys, I gotta cut you off.